Hey everyone, here is another director spotlight for Find Your Film. What we do for the director spotlight is each one of us takes a turn and we pick a director that we want to talk about. And usually we cover two or three movies from this person. The wheel spins, the wheel of fortune spun around, and it ended up with Eric Holmes, who this week he goes by the moniker On Deadly Ground. Eric Holmes, can you tell our listeners your choice for the director spotlight on Find Your Film?
Yes, this week we went with Ida Lupino, and uh, I didn't know beforehand, but apparently she's a very prolific director and an actress as well, probably best known for that. Um, Come to find out, she's pretty good. This Ida Lupino character, she's pretty good, and definitely worth checking out for sure.
It's weird because for this director spotlight, Bruce Perky, who calls himself his moniker this week is Ida Perkino, very, very clever Bruce Perky. You
No,
know,
Ida Perkino, not you. Ida Perkino.
I keep on calling her Ida, and I even joined a Facebook group called Ida Lupino because I am such a fan of hers, and I keep calling her Ida, like a moron that I am. Thank you, Ida Perkino, for that huge correction. By the way, I will be corrected many times because I'm gonna keep on calling her that horrible Ida all the time. But her name is Ida Lupino. Bruce Porky, is it really? I'm a little bit nervous because how much can one cover in one episode of Ida Lupino? Do you agree that it's really tough to just cover do a summation of her work as a
It
filmmaker?
really is. But I mean, if our whole point is that we're trying to spotlight somebody that either is underappreciated or maybe for a certain generation has kind of fallen off their radar, then we can at least, get them started on the path. So
Yes, yes, and even if you're a cinephile, I'd like to consider myself a pretty huge movie buff, and I have seen Ida Lupino in a bunch of movies like The Big Knife, High Sierra, On Dangerous Ground. I watched several times over my lifetime, and I always thought of her as a really. I honest my. I'll be honest. I never put her in the same rankings of, let's say, a Joan Fontaine, a Grace Kelly. I put her on the level of, which is fine, like a Greer Garson, B level leading lady, but a B level like Gloria Graham. Which is this level is fine. Being a B movie actress or leading lady is there's nothing wrong with being a Gloria Graham level actress in yesteryear in Hollywood. It's golden era. Great actresses came out of that era, but I think when you add her as a filmmaker, as a director, it just really ups the ante. Eric Holmes, before we get into the movies we're going to cover from Ida Lupino, what was the biggest just overall surprise from your research last couple of weeks watching her films and learning a little bit more about what she's done?
I think I was kind of surprised of how at least the movies she had a part in with directing. She kind of has a sort of punk rock aesthetic, and that's kind of you know people say that, but she definitely has some ideas that she wants to get across, and she's very adamant about getting those across. And I think, especially at the time that she did those movies, they're not ideas that I wouldn't say they were never presented, but you don't see a lot of those. Um, it's kind of like the ideas are presented, but they're not quite presented in the way in which she presents them. And I think she kind of and I could be wrong because I haven't seen all the movies around that time, and I always get surprised going back to older movies to find stuff that you don't expect from older movies or older classic movies. But she has a bunch of ideas that um, you just don't see in movies from that era, and it was pretty refreshing to kind of see that come out through her, at least through her movies anyway.
Bruce Perky, did you? agree regarding the punk rock aesthetic behind Ida Lupino's work, the way she approached her narratives, her filmmaking, specifically as a director.
Yeah, specifically as a director, I would say she was hitting that independent spirit intentionally at a time really 40 years too early. Like if she had come out in the 90s, like if she was doing what she was doing in the 90s, with the 90s attitude, of course, she would have been a hit, a runaway star. And she was somewhat of a hit anyway, but she was bucking so many power structures when she did it that the fact that she got some of the stuff out that she got out is pretty amazing. But yeah, I absolutely agree with what Eric said on that.
I was reading before we actually recorded right now, I was reading this fact that from BFI, British Film Institute, that from 1943 to 1948, there was no uh, female director directing herself in a movie.
Yeah.
0%. So you got to think with Ida Lupino, from 1950 to 1954, she formed a production company called the Filmmakers with her husband, Collier Young. Collier Young was a producer, writer. Collier Young later in his career would create the TV series Ironside. But what's interesting about the Filmmakers is she created that company with her husband. They divorced after the first year of actually making the Filmmakers, but she continued to work. They continued to work together as business partners, which I think that's a lot of credit to work with your ex-lover and to continue that company. And for this episode, we're going to cover one movie under the Filmmakers production company, and that is the 1950 film Outrage. And then we're also covering the 1951 film On Dangerous Ground, which is not part of the Filmmakers. It was directed by Nicholas Ray, but going back to our theme with Alice Guy Blaché about being underappreciated, Ida Lupino received a uncredited director's credit. She was uncredited for helping Nicholas Ray direct On Dangerous Ground. We're going to cover those two movies primarily. Eric Holmes, in the midnight hour, he decided to also check out the Ida Lupino directed The Hitchhiker from 1953. You know what? Knowing Bruce Perky down the road, I'm sure he's going to be watching that movie too.
I watched it too.
You watch it too?
Yes.
How many movies do you see every week, Bruce Berkey? My goodness, that's like 20.
3 billion.
Okay, 3 billion. I only see 1 billion. So okay, I guess I stand corrected yet again. We're covering The Hitchhiker, On Dangerous Ground, and Outrage. Eric Holmes, you are spearheading this episode. Which film do you want us to cover first?
I suppose we'll start with On Dangerous Ground. Mostly because that was one that Ida Lupino didn't direct.
Ida Lupino.
Do we have to, see? I told you, I do it too.
We thank you, Bruce. Can you look, Eric? Can you and I just shut up for this entire episode? Bruce, do you mind doing a one-off? Can you do a one-off and just
sure? I'll get a Greg puppet and an Eric puppet. I'm like, hey, Eric, what do you think?
So sorry, Eric. So sorry for stepping over. So On Dangerous Ground. Why is it? Yeah, you were saying about On Dangerous Ground.
Yeah, apparently of the ones we're gonna mention, this is the one that she didn't direct. It was
Nicholas Ray. Yeah, Nicholas
Ray. And apparently, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the homework I did on this said that Nicholas Ray got really sick for 4 days, and Ida Lupino took over for those 4 days.
Oh, and you did more research. Okay.
But how long was the whole shoot? Was it
that I don't know.
2 weeks? It could have been like half the shoot.
I mean, right. Actually, in watching this one, and I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself, but watching this one after finding out that she directed 4 days of it, taking over for Nicholas Ray, I'm watching because this was the last of all the Ida Lupino movies I've seen. This was the last one I saw, so okay, I kind of got an idea of what her style was, and so watching this, I'm like, did she direct that part? Did she direct that? Is this the part she directed? Like
I found myself doing the same thing, like trying to figure out which parts she directed, and I don't. Do we any of us know for sure?
No.
I I don't, but I think that speaks to how talented she was. You think of talented directors, and you think of David Fincher movies look like David Fincher movies, Tarantino movies look like Tarantino movies, so on and so forth. But there's something to be said about a director that can come in and mimic what needs to be done for the story or for the movie, or even television directors do this a lot. They'll bring in a television director, and the point is to push the story forward in a way that matches the look and feel of what's already there. And from what I can tell, Ida Lupino did just that on Dangerous Ground. Um,
Right. Now, here's the thing about On Dangerous Ground, though. Let's face facts, right? Okay, so Hollywood, Nicholas Ray is considered one of cinema's most acclaimed directors, especially from that day. I mean, he's along with On Dangerous Ground, he directed In a Lonely Place, one of Humphrey Bogart's most acclaimed performances. He also directed Johnny Guitar, Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean. So he's revered. So, and On Dangerous Ground is considered one of his best films. And I was surprised. The reason why I wanted to, we were talking about which Lupino film should be covered. The fact that she didn't even receive credit for this movie, and a lot of this stuff came out later probably, and it's really not talked about. And even whether it's 4 days, 5 days, 3 days, she acted in the movie as well, and she does a really good
Mm-hmm.
performance. Okay, and I'm gonna get to you, Bruce, in a second, but I I really love this as a noir. Bruce, would you consider this as like a noir? We're in November right now. We're time stamping this in
Yeah.
November. Is this a hard boiled noir, or do you think because of its sentimentality at a certain sense, it's really not too much of a noir for you?
No, I'd say it's a noir for sure. I think it's a very it's a strangely split film, and I think that's probably what makes it kind of unique. And once again, I'm not as steeped in noir as you are, but the fact that the first half is straight up noir, hard-boiled cops, in the city and all the stuff that's going down there, and then it just hard shifts to this other kind of mystery in rural, snowy, mountainous terrain, and that's when he meets Ida Lupino's character and all that, and that makes it a really strangely split movie as well. So which kind of the opposite of Eric's point, I can almost see they kind of have a little bit of different styles and tones to them. So I could see that she maybe did one half or the other half of that,
Oh, very
possibly,
interesting. Very
because the
interesting.
settings are so different that they actually look kind of different, although it does feel like one piece. So anyway, we can talk more about that, but yes, I would say it's noir.
Yeah, okay. So before we get to you, Eric, just very quickly, here's the plot synopsis. Rough City cop Jim Wilson, played by Robert Ryan, who, by the way, is fantastic in this movie. Jim Wilson is disciplined by his captain and is sent upstate to a snowy mountain town to help the local sheriff solve a murder case. I don't want to give too much away, but ultimately, this chase leads Jim Wilson, played by Robert Ryan, that cop, Jim Wilson, to meet up with Mary Maiden, played by Ida Lupino. Mary is blind. Not a big spoiler there. Mary is blind. And ultimately, the second half of the movie, we see Jim trying to solve this murder case upstate New York, and he starts bonding with Ida Lupino's character, Mary Maiden. And I thought it is split in two movies. I absolutely love the movie. We were talking on our last episode about how Hitchcock with Vertigo let the actual score sometimes envelop the entire narrative. That the person who did the score for Vertigo was Bernard Herrmann. The person
Mm-hmm.
who does the score for On Dangerous Ground is Bernard Herrmann. Listeners, if you have no idea what On Dangerous Ground is about, I don't even want to see it, but you love Bernard Herrmann, just watch the moments of the opening credits of On Dangerous Ground. It has this just an amazing score by Herrmann, Bernard Herrmann. Eric Holmes, your thoughts on Dangerous Ground? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you mixed? Overall thoughts?
I did like this one a lot. It's one of the things that struck me about this was it reminded me a lot of a Scorsese movie. because there's so many characters coming at you, and those characters go away. They don't become important later on. But the idea of Goodfellas, when Ray Liotta just walks around, and then you just start seeing all the other characters. You only get like a line or two from them, but it tells you everything you need to know about the characters. And I think that's just really good writing, kind of building the world in which the person's living in.
And also
And
because of Scorsese with Taxi Driver, it's with On Dangerous Ground. It plays he's a character who's getting swallowed or eaten up by the city.
yeah,
This, yeah. So that's a good
oh
point
yeah,
too.
yeah, definitely. And to the point, well, you say that it's not a spoiler that Ida Lupino is blind, and it isn't, but Ida Lupino doesn't show up till like halfway through the movie. I think
Mhm.
it's like 40, 50
Yes.
minutes into the movie until she shows up. And her entrance is perfect. And I'm wondering if that was the 4 days she shot.
Mhm.
Because the first time you see her is the back of her head, and she's walking in, and it's not like, oh, we're going to this blind lady's house. The guy's looking for the person that shot his son, or killed his son, or
Daughter. He
someone.
killed his daughter, looking for the person who killed his daughter. I believe that's what
Yeah,
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
he killed someone important to him, so
Yeah.
he's on a blood hunt for this guy, and so you don't know anything about Ida Lupino's character at this point. It's just a house you show up, and you see the back of her head, and she's walking around. But there's all these little subtle things, like she's walking. The first thing you see, she walks in, and there's a chandelier, and she has her hand up to, okay, there's the chandelier, and she ducks under it. She walks towards the fireplace, puts her hand out, and she knows she's near the fire. Like, she does all these really subtle things that kind of clue you into the fact that her character is blind, and then they reveal that later on. But I thought that was really well done, and yeah, overall this was a really great movie, and she's fantastic in it.
I was thinking, Eric, the thing you were talking about, Ida Lupino, it's parts that she directed, and the way you were explaining it, I I'm just guessing here, but I'm thinking the way the murder investigation is handled, especially in dealing with the suspect, I'm thinking maybe that might be a couple of those sequences might have definitely been directed by Ida Lupino, the way it was handled in a very sensitive and but realistic manner. That might
Mhm.
be, I could see a little bit of her creative hand. Even maybe even if Nicholas Ray was directing it, maybe she had a really good hand, because some of those scenes could have been touch and go and being really too way too melodramatic, but the way they handle some of the pivotal sequences I thought was really well done. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, also you got to figure that a lot of that is the writing too, because I don't think it as a director, I don't think she would have rewritten things. It was probably already there in the script. But yeah, I mean that's kind of one of the fun things about this. If you've seen Ida Lupino movies, and then you go into this, that's one of the funnest things I had about this movie. Was like, which is the part she directed with that knowledge. But even beyond that, it's just a really good movie. But I don't, sorry for the screaming in the background. There's someone rocking out apparently, but
Hard one.
uh
rocking out
yeah,
to On Dangerous Ground, man. I swear.
but
Right.
um I don't know how much we want to get into spoilers, but there's a there's a part towards the end where a character has a change of heart about something, where they realize something. Do you know
Mm.
what I'm talking about? He's
Well,
just a kid. That makes sense.
Mhm.
right, right. Yeah.
Okay, there's parts like that, and there's the scene where Ida Lupino talks to who's the main guy.
Oh, Robert Ryan,
She talks
the
to him,
cop.
and it's like,
Yeah.
and she's like, yeah, you didn't do this, you didn't feel pity for me, you just treated me like there's all these little things, these little subtle character things that they kind of sprinkle in there, that shows up in other Ida Lupino movies, that again, I mentioned this all has to be in the script, but this maybe this was something that she read the script and it's like, this is something I want to do, because
Yeah.
these kind of subtle character moments show up in all of her movies, at least all of them I've seen anyway.
Bruce, were you able to appreciate Robert Ryan's performance? Because I'm assuming over the years you've seen a bunch of his movies,
Yeah.
and to see him play sort of, I mean, I'm sure you had a little bit of a minor complaint. Can you just talk about you wanted maybe a different alternate towards the end, but was it kind of nice to see Robert Ryan sort
No,
of
not
soften up?
necessarily. I liked it. I liked it just the way it is. There is an alternate version of the ending they originally wanted. I'm not going to talk about it, which would have been it would have definitely toned the end of it differently. And that would have been really cool too. But I understand why they didn't do it. No, I thought he was great. And I absolutely double up on what Eric was saying about her performance, and how subtle it is for, especially for that era, the performance that she gives and just all those character choices. Once again, hard to know what's the script and what's her, but I strongly feel that she had an influence over that as well. One other thing I wanted to call out, and this isn't a character thing as much as just some technical stuff. I was really also struck by a couple of the, like, early on in the city, there's a chase that's partly handheld. I thought that was really different and interesting, where they're actually running down an alley and it's just like, wow, this feels very modern. And there's a
Yeah.
car chase. There's a car chase in the snow, and there's a crash and stuff that happens in the snow. And I thought all
Yes.
that was very technically interesting. There's a lot of stuff in actual, not on sets, that's done, actual location footage that's really striking and really, really well done, and pretty excellent for that era, I thought.
This is a movie that, in my opinion, could be remade if they
Oh yeah.
change it up. Yeah, it has, like you were saying, Bruce, two movies for the price of one. Interesting visual setups, city versus the country, harsh terrain, harsh city, guy who's absolutely he's against it, humanity wise. He just hates everyone in the world. And then he goes to a different place and sort of kind of finds himself. I just think this is a wonderful film.
And to Eric's point, also that beginning sequence in the city, like, all those characters are really fun. You could
Yeah.
spend a whole movie with
Oh,
his partners, and there's the kind of the femme fatale, like, gang mall that he meets up with, and you don't see
yeah.
her that much, but we get so much character out of her. It's got a lot going for it, and the father has his whole thing going on, and you understand his motivations. It's Yeah, for how short this movie is, it packs a ton of entertainment and character into it. So
Eric, yours.
You
Yeah.
mentioned this movie could be remade, and I actually kind of agree. As great as this movie is, it's kind of one of those things that kind of grabs you. It's like, oh, this is great, but you could do it in a
Yep.
different way. I have a pitch for you of an idea of who might do a great remake of this.
A director?
Yeah, Taylor Sheridan,
Oh,
the
forget
Wind
it.
River,
He-
and
I
wrote
I was
Sicario.
actually I was thinking of exactly that person. Yep,
wow.
absolutely.
That's a great choice. That is a great choice.
Yep.
I'm trying to top that. I can't top that. I can't top that one.
No, because if you think of Wind River, I mean, it's kind of a mood, you know, long lost cousin of this movie. They feel similar, even though they're generations apart. I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
Whoa. Yeah.
So
Maybe.
Taylor Sheridan, if you're listening, think about remaking On Deadly Ground.
Get Steven
Yeah.
Seagal. No, wait. No, that's wrong.
I'm thinking like a Chris Pine type as the lead. You could do Chris Pine as the lead, and because he's worked, yeah, he's worked with the Sheridan script before.
Mhm.
Chris Pine, Jeremy Renner type, right? And but yeah. Then
Right? He, who's going to take Ida Lupino's character?
that's such a hard thing to do. Who
You're gonna have to
could you,
you're gonna have to hire Victor Frankenstein to reanimate Ida Lupino. Just she's the only one.
right? I mean, there's not many actresses. Can you think one right off the top? I think Dakota Johnson. Could she do it? She's good. She's likable, but do they have that presence? Do they? You know?
Florence
Oh,
Pugh.
Florence Pugh could do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
because she's so nondescript in so many times and she can be a chameleon, I think someone like a Claire Foy could knock it out of the park,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. So yeah, yeah. But anyways, on Dangerous Ground, high recommend, I guess, or solid recommend from all
Yeah.
three of us.
Yes.
Ida Lupino, she stars with Robert Ryan. They are very good together. Again, Nicholas Ray directed the film, but remember, this is a director spotlight on Ida Lupino. She is also uncredited as a director for On Dangerous Ground, made in 1951. Our next film, I am going to pick our next film. Our next film will be, well, I guess The Hitchhiker. The Hitchhiker is a movie that I actually watched months ago with my better half, Anderson Cowan. And we actually did this for a Patreon situation, and he picked The Hitchhiker. And I think we did talk about Ida Lupino a little bit on that Patreon episode. And I think, knowing my stupidity, I probably called it Ida the entire Patreon episode like a moron. But The Hitchhiker was released in 1953, again, produced by the filmmakers, directed by Ida Lupino, and the writers were her husband, oh, actually her former husband, right? Thank you, Cinematics. Collier Young co-wrote the screenplay. He produced it. Oh, thank you, Eric Holmes, Cinematics again. So Collier Young and Ida Lupino, they were the writers for The Hitchhiker, and Ida Lupino directed it. And it stars Edmund O'Brien. Edmund O'Brien, we know Edmund O'Brien for his role in this movie called The Bigamist, which all three of us covered on the recent episode of Find Your Film. And that movie, The Bigamist, is also directed by Lupino. But first of all, Eric Holmes, your thoughts on The Hitchhiker, because it's been maybe about 4 or 5 months since I've seen The Hitchhiker. What is your overall thoughts on this 1953 film?
Oh, I got wonderful thoughts about this movie. Before I get into that though, I wasn't paying attention. You said you mentioned this on where?
On a Cinematics Patreon episode, I think Anderson and I covered The Hitchhiker
On a
on a previous.
Cinematics Patreon. So if you're listening to this, maybe check out Cinematics, the
Thank you, the
Patreon, and
Patreon.
then
Yeah,
you can get caught up to speed. But yeah, the
thanks.
Hitchhiker, I like this one a lot. This one actually reminded me a lot of Wages of Fear, like
What?
a lot.
Really? Get out
Yeah,
of here.
it might be because of the Wages of Fear is, and Sorcerer for that matter. They're kind of road movies. I mean,
Okay.
it sounds weird being that, but like that, they're the two guys get kidnapped and they're just on the road, and you have the idea of is he gonna kill him or not? Eventually get the idea of like, well, they're clearly the main characters, they're not gonna kill him anytime soon. But yeah, I definitely got a bunch of Wages of Fear vibes and actually some Breaking Bad vibes, probably because they're in South America. That probably has a lot to do with it. But yeah, this was really tense and really great character work and just fantastic all around. I think of the Ida Lupino movies we've seen, this might be my favorite one.
Very cool.
And it's
Okay.
probably one I'd watch again and again and again.
Okay, so The Hitchhiker, released in 1953 by the filmmakers. Plot synopsis: two fishermen pick up a psychotic escaped convict who tells them that he intends to murder them. When the ride is over, Bruce Perky, do you agree with Eric Holmes? Were you high on The Hitchhiker?
Yeah, this is a lot of fun, and it isn't my favorite of the ones we saw, but it's really good. What I really admire about this movie is it's super streamlined and it's very pure. Like it doesn't sidetrack really at all. It's very, like you said, basically they pick him up. He's a bad dude. He's threatening to kill him. We got to get to this place. I'm going to use you as hostages, essentially, and that's the story. And then all the little side things that happen to them on the way are the interest. And there's such great little touches in here. And once again, as a director, it's such a lean movie and different than the other ones we've seen. Like this is not a big character study, although there's some character elements to it. This is really more of an action suspense movie, really. And a couple of things I really loved, and the one thing is there's the whole thing about the the killer dude has a bad eye, like a messed up eyelid. So he tells them, like, as he goes, I'm going to be sitting here with a gun on him at night. You guys know, you're already smiling. This is such an awesome scene. I don't think I've ever seen this in another movie. And he says, like, my eye's messed up and it won't close. You're not going to know if I'm asleep or awake. So if you try to run, I might be awake. So they have several moments in the movie where you look over and he's like, one eye is like open a little bit. He's got a gun. And they're like, should we try to sneak out? Awesome little suspense moments like that. And another thing that caught my eye, I will disagree with Eric on one thing. I wasn't so sure that these guys might not get killed by the end. There's a scene towards the end that really had me wondering about how it was going to go down. But I was really, really pleasantly surprised by the presentation of the Mexican people in this movie. They're throughout the movie, and they're generally not treated as caricatures. And there's Spanish language throughout the movie. There's a lot of stuff in there that I could imagine being done in a very different way. And I really like that aspect too. It seemed very much more genuine and real to the setting. So
a couple of things to add to that. Well, first of all, I didn't know if they would be killed or not by the end. It's just
yeah.
When I said that, I was talking about like the middle of the movie. It's like they're at least gonna get to the end. Whether or not they live then is
yes.
But to the Mexican characters, and the version I saw was subtitled sometimes and not others. And I actually no, maybe I don't think I've seen any subtitles.
I don't think there was any subtitles in the one I saw.
I know a little bit of Spanish, but it is one of those we talked about the Iceman, their man Austin Ice, where they speak the language, but there's no subtitles. I don't know, something about that. I really appreciate that when the characters are speaking a foreign language and they don't need to subtitle it because you get it. Like, I don't understand exactly what they're saying, but I get what's going on. And another thing that I just remembered was the two guys that are on the fishing trip. Now, it wasn't specific in this, and had I not kind of already been on the same page as, kind of in the same mental space as I think Ida Lupino is going on, I think those two characters, are they having a homosexual?
Yeah.
They seem to be having an affair from their wives, because there was that point where the guy that kidnaps them brings up that their wives think they're here and they're here. Why is that? And they don't really dive into it, but the way that Ida Lupino likes to kind of go in directions with characters that isn't normal. I think there may have been a homosexual relationship between them.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it
Maybe,
past
maybe
it.
not.
I wouldn't put it past it. Well, I mean, we're not covering the big. We covered the bigamist on the last episode, but the bigamist, the fact that it really humanizes Edmund O'Brien's character as the bigamist. Any other person would have brought up this social topic of bigamy by throwing aspersions to the main character, making that character, even though Bruce, you found Edmund O'Brien's character in The Bigamist unlikable,
Yeah.
they were putting him up to be more of a human being. So I wouldn't put it past that little subtle nuance that Ida Lupino decided to do. That's a very interesting.
And I hadn't considered that, but also if you think about it, a big part of this movie is the whole idea of masculinity and what is tough and what isn't tough. There's a very interesting subtext. First of all, it's a strange arrangement, right? Two guys getting basically kidnapped by another guy. Like, I don't think I've ever seen that dynamic. I can't think of a movie that has that dynamic. Yeah. And as it goes along, there's the things where he's shooting the gun and making the one guy, he's really pushing these guys to submit to him, all throughout. And at one point he's even saying things to them like, wow, I don't owe anybody. Why you guys, he's almost like telling them, like, how are you putting up with this from me? He's kind of almost taunting them for being less masculine. So I could see that being a little subtext too, that kind of goes along with what Eric's saying. It's very interesting how that dynamic works out through this movie, as on top of just the straight suspense aspect of it.
Well, also when the hitchhiker kind of scares him,
Mm-hmm.
and well, especially when with the eye thing, when he's sleeping, they get a chance to escape, and they don't, because there's generally a connection between those two guys.
Yep.
Yes.
There's then you could see it as, oh, they're friends, but maybe there's something more to that. That there's
Yes.
definitely a strong connection between those two.
And he
That
considers them suckers for that. He says that they're suckers for basically
yeah.
being weak, you know, and that they could have escaped. He said one of you guys could have escaped. So it's a whole subtext to that, which is interesting.
Credit
So,
goes to the killer, Emmett Myers. Is That's the name? The
mhm.
killer in this movie. Emmett is played by actor William Talman, Talman. Not a very really well known actor, but he does a great job as the killer, the serial killer in The Hitchhiker. His character is so annoying. You can't wait for him to actually. You're praying, you're hoping that he gets his comeuppance at the end. Obviously, we're not going to mention what happens to his character at the end. Here it
And he
comes.
looks almost exactly like Dan Hartman from Hungry Eyes. He's got this hungry eye. But he if you watch that video, it's like, dude, that guy's a dead ringer for him. It's like sprinkle a bit of Jeremy Renner, and that's like the same guy.
Yeah, okay, so anything else about The Hitchhiker? We guess another record. To be honest, the first time I saw The Hitchhiker, I liked it. I know Anderson didn't like it as much. I liked it, but I didn't love it as much as both of you. So that's The Hitchhiker. Now that I really know more of Ida Lupino's work, I can't wait to actually rewatch the film. And again, to your point, Eric Holmes, there's some really interesting visual shots, if I recall, in The
Mhm.
Hitchhiker as well. And I think with the filmmakers, what the production company and Ida Lupino, which she's doing during these 4 to 5 years of its existence, she wanted to tackle sociological subjects, and any normal filmmaker could have brought a heavy-handed approach to the material. And I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like she really brought a mixture of verite and cinematic style, and also human insight into the mix. And I think that's what
Yes.
makes her body of work interesting. What do you guys think on that?
Well,
As far as
she's definitely like subtle as far as we talked about bigamous in the previous episodes, but you know, she has a way of adding character moments that's not it's not like right out there. She'll add like these little tiny, someone says a thing or someone looks at someone in such a way, but it adds so much to the character that might not always be there. And I again, some of that's probably the writing, some of that's probably the acting, but this is like throughout her filmography is, the little bit I've seen, that it can't be an accident. The common denominator is Ida Lupino, and if she's in all these movies and the same thing makes its way into all these movies, I have to imagine she has a big part in inserting that into it.
Yep.
Bruce, you think she's basically making these Lifetime TV movie subjects
Yeah.
interesting, right?
Yeah, she's taking things that could be easily like straight up exploitation, straight up very generic good bad characters, and she's adding nuance and depth to them that they wouldn't have to still be a successful movie, but by her doing that, she elevates them into something pretty special, and that's why we're still talking about them. So,
Before we get to our last movie from Ida Lupino under the filmmaker's banner, I'm not gonna do a review. I'm just gonna do a quick interject. At the time of this taping, it's November, middle part of November 2020. November is also known as hashtag Noirvember. If you want an interesting noir, my mother, who is a bigger movie fan than I am, she actually was urging me, Eric Holmes, and Bruce Perky to watch this film called Roadhouse. I did not want to inflict Roadhouse on either of them because they have to watch so many movies, and they're not her sons. So it's upon me to actually listen to my mother. I decided to see Roadhouse. She plays a torch singer who ends up at a roadhouse, which is basically a bar and a bowling alley smushed together, and it's a noir, and she is so fantastic. Little spoiler here. Ida Lupino, she's not a great singer. She plays a torch singer, but the idea of this movie of Roadhouse is she people are so amazed by her presence and the way she delivers her song, and she sings like this, and it's
Mhm.
not very she can't really carry a tune very well, but she carries the room. And I think with Ida Lupino's work as a director, it's sort of interesting because these subject matters, if you don't know her, if you don't know who Ida Lupino is and you look at the plot synopsis of these movies, you go, oh, this looks like a cheap exploitation movie from the 50s or late 40s, and I'm never going to see it. Well, you would be doing yourself a disservice, because if it's directed, like Eric Holmes is saying, directed by Ida Lupino, you're missing out. And Roadhouse, as far as a noir, it's fantastic, and I hope down the road you guys check it out. It's not streaming anywhere. I've hunted it down. It's easily can easily be seen on your YouTubes. So check out Roadhouse on YouTube. It is my favorite performance by Ida Lupino to date. She is, and if you like film noir, crackerjack, snappy dialogue, Roadhouse is the movie to watch. Another thing that surprised me about this Ida Lupino discovery, I'm not talking about research. I purchased a book, was been reading a little bit about her, really interesting stuff. Selfishly, the most interesting stuff is Bruce Perky and I often disagree about movies. And I remember on the off chance Bruce Perky has this I'm gonna I'm gonna lay it all on the table. Bruce Perky over me and Eric. He Whenever we have to watch a movie, Bruce Perky's always early. He's does this the homework early. He watches the movies before me and Eric. Eric and I are usually sort of Eric is the second one. He's actually pretty diligent. I usually do my stuff under the gun, but Eric was saying that Bruce was saying that out of all the movies, Outrage was the one to watch. And Bruce Perky, this is the last film we're covering from Ida Lupino.
Mhm.
Outrage, released in 1950. What made this movie sing to you?
This one, to me, of all the ones we saw, this one felt to me like this might have been the one that, of the ones we saw, that really was a passion project for her. It, and I felt like I saw the most style from her in this movie. She didn't act in it, but I loved some of the sequences in here a ton. Um, and it's also a very daring movie. I was watching a little documentary about her, and they were talking about how they had to erase any form of the word rape from this movie. They couldn't call it anything like that in this movie, which is the point of this movie. We'll talk about it here in a second. They had to call it criminal assault, I think, or something like that in this movie. But we can talk a little more. But there's a few sequences in here that I think are quite amazing. And I think the character choices and the character work, like we've been talking about, are really interesting in this movie. And um, it's a woman's perspective straight up in this movie as well. And I think that makes it extra special for it, that time period. So
Outrage, 1950. A young woman who has just become engaged has her life completely shattered when she's raped while on her way home from work. That young woman is played by Mala Powers, Mala Powers. Eric Holmes, your thoughts on Outrage? What did you think?
Well, any movie or any story that brings a light towards the pain someone feels when they're being victimized in the way that the character was in Outrage is fine by me. Not that it's fine that they've been victimized, but um, when someone's been sexually assaulted, it's a bad thing. And I think people say it's a bad thing, but a lot of times I don't think that they um, really pull in and take into perspective what they go through. Um, and in my opinion, this movie does that pretty well. Um, I actually, Angie Clark, who is the genesis of the Ida Lupino. Hold on, sorry, got a
Of
little.
course.
Angie Clark, who had was the genesis of us doing Ida Lupino to begin with. She had a different take on this, and I don't want to put words in her mouth.
Oh,
She
okay.
wasn't she wasn't a fan of how the main character was a victim, was like scared of everyone and needed a man to help her. And I kind of agree with that to a point, but also we have to take into consideration of when this came out and so on and so forth.
Right.
But yeah, I think this was a good stepping stone to get there, to further that conversation.
Right.
It's not perfect. Again, a movie being remade, this would probably be something worth remaking today to kind of get a more updated and nuanced version of that same story. But for something that came out when it did, I thought it was pretty successful, and I'm glad it exists.
Outrage, Mala Powers. I've only seen her in Don Quixote. I remember watching her in Don Quixote and thinking to myself, wow, this Mala Powers, she is beautiful to look at. She is a presence. I'm guessing here, but having Ida Lupino as her director really helped shape her because even though she is quote unquote the victim in this movie and she feels a lot really helpless in understandably so in many situations for most of the narrative, Mala Powers gives quite a strong and memorable performance in Outrage. And a part of me was thinking, Bruce, do you think maybe she was inspired by working with Ida just to get that performance out of there?
I
Because
would assume so. I can't imagine that Ida doesn't have a huge influence on this entire production. This is what it feels like to me. Because, like I said before, so obviously what Eric is saying is totally true, um, and it isn't. It is dated in that aspect, but I think that at its time it had to be extremely daring, and the fact that the main character is sympathetic throughout, and that we're supposed to be understanding, the anguish of what's happening to her, as opposed to looking at her as like, what did she do wrong or anything. Like, it never takes that point of view of her, you know what I mean, which I think that's appreciated as well. But she had to shape that performance, must have. And the fact that um just the fact that, once again, we talked about sort of the unusual things that occur in Ida's movies. There's some really unusual moments in here that don't have to be there, that just enrich it. Like when she goes off and leaves, and she's once again a bus. When she's in that place and she's just packaging oranges and stuff, and I loved some of that just almost mundane daily life, and those kind of things. I love that in her movies as well, how she just kind of makes this real, like, full world from that time period. So
there's one character, Reverend Bruce Ferguson. Has a
mhm.
pretty big role in this movie. He's played by Todd Andrews. And I get what Angie Clark was saying about, just needing other people to help her and everything. But the way this Reverend is characterized in the movie, it's a very nuanced role. And you're
Yep.
thinking it's going to go one way. I'm not going to spoil what happens, but
Yep.
the Reverend's relationship to the woman is Ann Walton, played by Mala Powers. I thought that was
Mhm.
that relationship, the way it actually comes to fruition and
Plays out.
plays out
Yep.
today would be an interesting watch.
Mhm.
Today, like right now, yeah.
I
It's
thought so too.
1950, 70 years ago. 70 years ago. And I thought this was a
Yep.
wonderful relationship that they had. And that's just that's something like you were talking about, Bruce, about some of the unexpected things that you get from a story like this. You're thinking it's going to be this this preachy thing about the perils and the negatives and all that stuff. Understandably, all that stuff is addressed, but there's all this undercurrent of humanity and
Yeah.
resonance that comes with it too. So I really ended up really loving Outrage. It's on available, I believe, on Prime Video. Did I see? No, no,
Mhm.
no. We saw that on YouTube. We saw it
Yeah,
on I
YouTube.
saw YouTube, and it was a decent enough transfer.
Mhm.
I hope all of these movies get the complete, wonderful, amazing Blu-ray treatment because it really deserves it. So,
Can I call out in that movie also a couple of things technically that I thought were really awesome? And Eric can chime in, or you guys can both chime in. There's a couple. The sequence where she's getting pursued by the guy is amazing, and
yeah,
it's straight up beautiful noir type shots and angles and shadows and the whole thing. That's all done super great. Go ahead.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Go on.
But there's another shot which is much more subtle that blew me away, and you can almost not notice it because it's so subtle. But towards the end of the movie, there's a square dance or something kind of going on,
yeah.
and we're behind the whole scene in front of us are all dancing, and she's off to the side, and the camera follows her going around behind the dance, like the far side of it, and then the camera pushes through the middle of the dance to meet her on the other side, and that shot was super subtle but
Mm.
totally interesting and very creative and just beautiful. A beautiful kind of shot that you don't necessarily have to have in a movie. Once again, you don't have to have it in a movie like that. They could have had showed the long shot and just gone to a close shot, but she made it interesting. And there's stuff like that throughout that in this movie like that are subtle, but if you watch them from a filmmaker standpoint, she's working at a good level for how early she is in her career, you know. So just wanted to call that out.
Eric, you wanted to say something?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I brought up Angie Clark, and I would like to reiterate, I am not her, and if I am speaking out of turn,
You're nowhere
I
close to her,
apologize.
Eric. You're
No,
nowhere close.
no. I just really hate putting words in people's mouths. So if I fucked up, Angie, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Um, but one of the things I wanted to point out was when she got the job. This was the part where it kind of sunk into me, where she got the job doing the oranges.
Right.
And she's kind of looking around. These are people that are not dangerous, but to me, it seems like that where the guy comes up behind her. She's like, what, like she doesn't trust him. And why should she? She didn't know who he is, and she just got chased down and raped. And I thought it did a really good job of kind of illustrating how um when something that horrible happens to you, how that can change your mind just completely. You know,
Yeah.
you don't look at the world the way you did before. The world is now a dangerous place.
Yep.
The world used to be a happy place. Oh, that that I'm gonna take the bull by the horns and live my life. And then this thing happens to you, and now your world is just wrecked. And that was another real subtle moment where I kind of seen that, yeah, this person ruined her life. And this is something that, hey, so and so showed up. Normally, maybe before that happened, she'd be like, hey, how's it going? Oh, cool, I got a job. This is fun. But now that little bit of joy in her life is replaced with worry and defensiveness and regret and uh, fear. And that's
Yeah.
pretty sad. And it's just another example of Ida Lupino just pulling in these little tiny character moments that you say it out loud, it doesn't mean much, but in context of what's going on, it means everything, especially to these characters.
I have a quiz for both of you. The filmmakers lasted 4 years. Why did it only last 4 years? What are some of your guesses?
The filmmakers lasted 4 years.
Yeah, the
Yeah, the
production
the production
company that
company.
that she created, the
Um,
filmmakers that the company that she created that released all these movies. Yeah,
from what it looked like, from what I saw on that little mini documentary, which is pretty, not really super detailed, but her third marriage really sent her down a path, because her third husband was a super womanizer, drinking, and a lot of stuff, and she stayed with him for like 21 years. And she got pretty heavily into that at that point too. So I think that probably affected a lot of it.
Oh,
So, and there was some blacklist stuff that was happening around that time too,
that
because yeah, so there were some different things going on.
Eric, do you have a guess on why it only lasted from 1950 to 1954?
I have a theory,
Yes.
and I did not know this before you asked the question, and I'm probably way wrong, as I usually am. Did they get sued a lot for the
It's good.
stuff that they had in the movie? Maybe
It's a good
something they had
theory.
in the movie, and they spent a lot of money paying either fines or court costs or whatever.
That's a great guess. And the answer lies into what something Bruce Perky said at the beginning of the episode when he said that Ida Lupino was probably 40 years ahead of the curve. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
what happens when you're ahead of the curve is sometimes you don't make it.
yeah,
You create good stuff that lasts,
Oh,
that
that's sad.
transcends time and weather. But maybe at the moment, at the here and now, your business is like a big zero. I'll give you an example. In 1953, they did The Bigamist. Ida Lupino, hardly any budget. How do you get an Oscar winner like Joan Fontaine, Ida Lupino, of course, and Edmund O'Brien, who is an A-list actor, close to an A-list actor, to star in a movie by the filmmakers with no budget? The answer is they each of them were promised profits on the back end. So you
uh,
got to think this movie, 1953, 67, made 67 years ago or whatever, they were ahead of the curve. They made really good content. They released movies, but they did not know how to distribute the movies. And
yeah.
when you don't have a distributor, when you're not under the umbrella of a studio, even if you're making, we're talking about some really good movies. On Dangerous Ground, by the way, does not count as part of the filmmaker's catalog. Within this 4 year span, they made some really good movies, but they didn't make a damn darn dime.
Well, and there,
I'm
what's
getting
the
very angry right now.
yeah,
Isn't that
and what's
crazy?
the
That's crazy, right, Eric?
what's the financial market for independent quality drama at that period? They're
That's
still fighting
right.
the whole system, and the B movies are all like super B movies. They're like sci-fi and
But
horror
the
and
B
stuff like that.
movies, again, like you were saying, you know
Yeah,
better than me, Bruce. They're probably under some kind of studio umbrella. They get the
yeah, and they
cushion.
just throw them out to drive-ins or whatever in the late 50s, and
Yeah, but there's people who are smarter than us in the early 1950s who know how to like Eric, like who know how to distribute a movie. And
yeah,
what these people, and even Ida Lupino was saying this, like we knew how to make the movies, we thought we knew how to distribute them, but they did not have the business mind or the wherewithal, the know-how. Because I mean, you're not going to subtract them for doing this because they're just trying to make really good movies. Oh,
yeah.
and you're also going to tell them to be awesome business people as well. That's a lot to ask.
We mentioned, I can't remember what episode, but I mentioned earlier on going back to dig through movies because they're not popular at the time.
Yeah.
The idea that hundreds of years from now, everyone's going to remember Avengers Endgame, but they're not going to remember, say, I'll throw Piercing out there.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
that's not going to Piercing is not going to be a movie that transcends time like that. Um, and yeah, the what you're saying is a perfect illustration of that. Um,
Yeah.
the Casablancas and the Gone with the Wind of the world, is great or overrated or whatever you want to call them. That they're there, but that they're going to be remembered. But then, yeah, these great Ida Lupino movies, like well, you didn't, Greg, because your mom's a fan, but the rest of us have to dig to find these because they're not popular. But I guess I guess the point is you gotta dig to find shit, and there's gems everywhere, and little treasures to find. And on one hand, I'm pissed off that you know someone like Ida Lupino isn't as revered as she should be, but at the
Yes.
same time, it's pretty exciting because if movies that she did that are this great that are hidden What other treasures are there to find?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And again, to that point, Bruce, you were talking about the indie market, the indie world. We
Mm-hmm.
always talk about Jim Jarmusch, John Sayles. Of course, before that, the godfather of them all, Cassavetes. So
Mm-hmm.
Ida Lupino, obviously, if you're a TCM fan, if you're a fan of film festivals, her name has been bandied about and revered and all that stuff in its rightful place. But I would hopefully down the road, her name should be right amidst these other indie names as far as what they were trying to do.
And the part that would really piss you off, and this will piss you off, Eric, is that because she actively didn't re-sign up with the studios, because for the beginning she was just a studio player, right? They kept offering her tons of money to basically just be a studio actress, kind of a second banana to like Betty Davis and stuff. And when she actively left to go make movies and then they couldn't make money anymore, she had to finally go back to the studios and they would only consider her for acting roles. They would never consider her to direct. And that's one thing where if she had been a man and had created those independent movies, they would have considered her for directing some of their studio pictures,
Oh
even if they
yeah.
were. So, and then that's when she goes in, then she basically goes back down and does TV. And she directed tons of TV episodes in the 60s, especially. She was like one of the highest quantity TV directors in that era. So she did a ton. In fact, I watched one Twilight Zone she directed. And I think I read that she was the only woman to direct a Twilight Zone episode, and among hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other TV episodes she did. So it's almost like she said, like, well, at least here I can, have a chance to at least use these skills, even though we probably were robbed of at least
Oh,
10 more solid, if not great movies. Who knows what she could have done if she'd just been back in the studio as a director for the next 15 or 20 years.
that
Yeah.
said, she's had a successful directing career, like you were saying with the
Yeah.
TV. She was prolific in television, and she's. Oh wait, Eric Holmes, were you a are you a Twilight Zone fan? Are you a fan of the Twilight Zone?
I wouldn't say a fan only because I've seen them. I like them, but if you did Twilight Zone trivia, I would not be the teammate
Okay,
to
but you're
to
a
get you
fan.
points.
Bruce, you said you recently you just dropped you did a little drop a little hint. You said I recently saw a Twilight Zone episode directed by Lupino. What did you think of the masks?
It's great. I mean, and it's
You
really
you know
good
what? Yeah,
actually.
of course you remember it. You remember it when you
It's
were a kid.
it's hilarious. It still works today. I like a lot of those do. But to Eric's point way back earlier in the episode, how sometimes when you get brought in like to be part of a series that's already created, you want to not stick out, but you want to be part of that. So you wouldn't look at it and go, she was better or worse or anything. She just was solidly right in there with their episodes.
Yeah.
It looks like a Twilight Zone episode because it is a Twilight Zone episode because she's a talented director. So yeah,
There was a
it's
radio drama called Suspense. Okay, I was
mhm.
listening to on Spotify, and sometimes when you can listen to podcasts where they do old timey radio dramas from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and they had a double header from Suspense drama with Ida Lupino in two
Yeah,
episodes. I listened to it while I was doing my weekend DVD Blu-ray hunts, and man, the plots were like sort of over overbaked
yeah,
murder mystery,
right.
murder-ish. Yeah, these kind of things that would come out from the 50s. But when Ida Lupino is doing the voiceover and the acting, it just ups everything. It just ups the entire proceedings. And even within radio drama, she excelled. So I just can't, I'm going on IMDb and it's just, we don't have 500 hours to cover the
Right.
illustrious works of Ida
She
Lupino.
started she started her screen career at 13.
Wow. Yeah.
She was
Working.
making tons of movies by the time she was 17 and 18. I think I was one of the things I was watching. They were saying earlier in her career when she was just acting, they're kind of presenting her as the next whoever. She was making thousands of dollars a week in that era, and she could have just done that.
Yeah.
But that is the other sign that she was so independently minded already that she was willing to give that up, like that assured success, to try to do these things that she did. So we should be very thankful that she got to make what she did get to make. you know.
Yeah, and it's so cool because we love movies so much. It's great to know that she really loved to direct. I mean,
Yeah.
even when she didn't, like you said, Bruce, even when she didn't get those big movie roles, which I mean, movie directing projects, which is frustrating, she was still able to flourish in television. So, yeah, that is it. Eric Holmes, before we go, final thoughts on this spotlight on Ida Lupino, just in general.
Yes, I gotta thank Angie Clark because I mean that what I was talking about with the my octopus teacher in the previous episode. You know, this is just a little thing. Hey, watch the bigamist and watch the bigamist and look what it snowballed into. And
Yeah,
I'm glad it did because Ida Lupino is, or she was a fantastic talent. I would have never came across her otherwise, and I'm glad I did because
by
Ida
the
Lupino is great, and I look forward to watching her other movies as well.
have you ever seen the masks from the
No,
Twilight Zone? You've
not
never
that I know of. Again, like
s-
I'd seen a lot of Twilight Zones back in the day, but the only one I remember is there was a guy. He's like in the middle of the street, and there was like an invisible wall around him, and that creeped me out. That's the only
Mm.
one I remember. I've seen a bunch of them, but I'm not that big of a Twilight Zone fan that I remember any of them to speak
Bruce
about.
Bruce Perky,
It's great.
what do you think? What do you think Eric Holmes would think if once he sees the
Oh, he'd
masks?
like it. I'm sure he'd like it. Watch The Masks. It's like she's in acts in an episode too, but The Masks is the one she directs, and it's I think they're all on Netflix. The whole original series.
Oh, really? And
Yeah.
she's good. And the other one, she's good too. It's like a
Yeah,
Sunset Boulevard
yeah. The other one's
type
kind
of.
of a Sunset Boulevard where she's acting in it. And that's the other thing about Ida Lupino, I think, that struck me is that once you've seen her, she's so striking in her persona, not just her looks, but her persona, that I'll see her in any movie now and I'll immediately like Ida Lupino. Like bang, there she is. And she just shines off the screen. So I mean,
I
she's a spectacular talent.
and it really feel. I don't know how to put this. It doesn't feel like she's trying. She's just being.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
You don't see the effort, and that's you just see the presence and the innate talent. I'm so glad. Thank you, Angie Clark, for introducing us to more of her work. Bruce Perky, you want to sign off and just final summation on Ida Lupino?
Just echoing what everyone else has said. Thank you for introducing us to Ida Lupino. I look forward to hearing and seeing more of what she's done. And she's spectacular. And if you don't know any of her work, please go search out some of these movies we talked about or some of the other ones and be amazed that you didn't know about her before.
All right, with that, that is Ida Lupino. We will be back in a couple of weeks where I am going to announce that our next director spotlight will be Walter Hill. We will be covering, yes. I keep forgetting what Walter Hill movies are we covering? Oh, yes, we're covering Brewster's Millions
Streets
and
of
another
Fire.
48
Oh,
hours. Which one? Is that right? Bruce Perky, was that Brewster's Millions and another 48 hours?
It'll make my name easy for that episode. I'm already there. So Brewster's Millions. There you go.
I can't say this for sure until we record. We're gonna have the Walter Hill movies we're gonna talk about for sure. I suspect that we'll go deep dive into many Walter Hill movies.
Yes. Wait. Okay. I literally love Walter Hill. I know Eric Holmes. I'm surprised you don't have more Streets of Fire merch all around your area. Bruce
Streets of
Perky.
Fire.
Well,
I oh,
actually, I have this shitty tattoo of Michael Pare on fire attacking Gary Busey in tornado mode, but that is Michael Pare from Streets of Fire.
Oh,
that
that's
is
It
awesome.
looks like a 3-year-old drew it because maybe it did. I don't know.
that's amazing. Bruce Perky, aside from the Warriors, are you a huge fan of Walter Hill as well?
Yes, yes. Walter Hill is great. So
Okay.
good.
Okay.
I can't wait.
We are the stereotypical bro movie buffs with the Walter Hill stuff. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize. That'll be our next director spotlight. Until then, guys, we will we will see you next week on Find Your Film.